The original Robocop from 1987 is often cited for its prescient portrayal of the future. Apart from all the brilliant action and character moments and satirical humor, it made some accurate predictions about technology and the direction of society, capitalism, corporate greed, and media. Scenes that come to mind are CDs being used to store video, which we know as DVDs, Robocop's data spike, which is like a USB flash drive. We get to see virtual house tours. Hell, even the concept of a robotic police officer isn't fantasy anymore. The fallen state of Detroit has come to pass, and the bizarre, off-putting media coverage jumping back and forth between tragedy and fluff piece is basically how we experience it now in the real world. 150 dead in a thunderstorm. This woman lives with 40 cats and makes $2 million a year. We live in the world of Robocop now. A world of mega-corporations and criminal negligence, and an unsustainable divide between the haves and the have-nots. But what about the sequels? Robocop 2 builds on Robocop 1's world somewhat, but you might call me crazy for saying that Robocop 3 actually adds some of the scariest elements of this world. Things that have come to disturb me in my adult years, seeing our world as it is now. Robocop 3 is not a good film. It is, in fact, a terrible film. An embarrassing, pathetic, poorly made, hilarious mess. There's so much to point and laugh at. Robocop fighting a cyborg ninja is something you'd expect to see in a cartoon or a video game. He's flying around with a rocket pack by the end of the movie. You can actually see the strings holding him up. And the little girl with super cool hacking abilities controlling Ed 209 was stupid to me even as a kid when I saw it.
I am now authorized to be loyal as a puppy.
But I don't want to crap on Robocop 3 because that's been done already. Everyone talks about how bad Robocop 3 is. Doing that here would be boring. And honestly, after rewatching it several times for this video, it grew on me a little as I started looking past its flaws and found enjoyment in some of the stuff it actually gets right. Robocop 3 is much more of a continuation of the world of Robocop than Part 2 is. Part 2 fumbles as a sequel partly because it doesn't push us further into this interesting place. We don't get to see the evolution of the plans of OCP or the character of Robocop. The state of Detroit is essentially the same as it was in the first movie, and Robocop's involvement in the plot is entirely impersonal, so it's hard to care. Despite Robocop 3 being a bad movie, there are some things that I like better about its narrative direction. The realization of OCP's plans with urban pacification units, the idea of a savage group of criminals taking over parts of the city, and those criminals being enlisted by OCP to increase their numbers, and Robocop having a personal involvement in the plot, this time forming a bond with an orphan child and siding with the civilian rebellion against the forces of OCP. Here we actually see the wheels turning. It is time to build Delta City, and you don't just start with constructing buildings, you gotta start pushing out all the people in your way. There's a lot of poor neighborhoods where OCP wants to build, so they put together a private military force to clear the way. OCP runs the entire city now, including the police department. They build military weaponry. They can definitely make something like this happen. And now, 30 years after it came out, it's impossible for me to watch this movie and not see the real world. We have seen the militarization of police over the decades, especially since the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, with military hardware and vehicles being delivered to US police departments and then deployed against protesters. This situation in Robocop 3 reminds me a lot of the protests over the Dakota pipeline in 2016, where you had law enforcement doing the bidding of oil companies, tear-gassing people, firing rubber bullets, pepper spraying people, and using dogs against the people trying to protect their natural water resource. Robocop comes across poor, frightened people in a church hiding from the military forces outside, and though he is an officer of the state and OCP, he cannot act against innocent civilians. He has competing directives: uphold the law and protect the innocent. Here he must make a human choice, and he chooses to fight for the people. This leads to him getting severely damaged, taking an explosive round to the chest in a hilarious scene. Man, that looks so bad. The people take him in and help him recover. Robocop is now an asset to the Resistance, and they plan on how to fight back against OCP. So the corporate military thing is definitely a scary concept, but that's something that comes across as obviously bad when you watch Robocop 3. Now, and when it came out in the 90s, it was clear that the audience was supposed to see what OCP is doing and think that's bad. But what really creeps me out now, something that never bothered me before, is the idolization of police officers. And this is a controversial topic, so I'll tread lightly. Now, I'm not anti-cop, and I'm not saying you can't look up to particular figures in law enforcement and find them inspiring, but it's a whole other thing to be selling action figures of them to children. If you're not thinking about it too much, you might see this scene of a child with her Robocop figure and think it's cute or kind of funny. We, the audience, love Robocop, and so does she. And the people of the movie love him so much that they sell Robocop action figures. This girl's admiration for Robocop is what leads her to advocate for his inclusion in the rebellion. She believes in him because he's the good guy. There is no moral ambiguity in the Robocop movies. OCP is bad, Robocop is good. But we know that the real world is more complicated than that. And you gotta ask, who is selling these action figures? Is it OCP? Did they just license it out? They're really selling action figures of the man they wouldn't let die and turned into a machine with him having no say in the matter? It's kind of fucked up. He better be getting a cut. And it's more fucked up when you think about this concept outside of just Robocop. Robocop is a police officer. He is a local government employed authority figure. In the world of this movie, he is real. He's not a comic book character that people look up to. He's a real cop, and kids can buy action figures of him. Can you imagine the absolute shitstorm there would be if that actually happened? Imagine your local police department in the real world making action figures of certain police officers that happen to get attention in the news or through social media. Imagine real police officers being turned into hero figures that become marketed to children during their cartoons. It wouldn't be 5 seconds until the wrong cop got this kind of attention, and it would be so horribly politicized, because how do you see the police? Is it a nice message that the police are there to protect them, or is it a way of getting kids to obey and not question the state's authority? You'd have people on one side saying it's dangerous to idolize authority figures because they exist to control and oppress. You'd have people saying all cops are heroes and it's better to have a figure of a real-world hero than a pretend one. You'd have figures of cops with controversial histories and a racism scandal or two being celebrated by extremists. It's such a messed up concept. Robocop 3 appears to come down on the side of this being horrible because of the way the commercial for Johnny Rehab is presented. Johnny Rehab is the mascot of the OCP Rehabs, which is the urban pacification unit made up of mercenaries. It's so obviously a piece of propaganda, overly exaggerated, juxtaposed with a scene of a news report lying about Robocop killing a bunch of innocent people. But if this were to happen today, would this commercial be that far off, given the meme culture we live in today where everything is ironic or a troll? In a world where politicians literally advertise themselves by shooting machine guns on TV? Johnny Rehab, a fictional character with his rocket launchers and tanks, is designed to get kids on the side of the OCP forces as they're evacuating hundreds of thousands of people from their homes and killing people that resist. We, the viewers, are supposed to be disgusted by this horrible propaganda being marketed to kids, and of course finding it funny because of the funny satirical nature of the film. However, at the same time, the movie treats the idea of a Robocop figure as something cute, when really it's the same thing, isn't it? If not worse, since Robocop is real. We know Robocop is good, we love him, so we aren't revolted by seeing a child with a figure of him. But it's still the state and a corporation marketing a real-life authority figure to children as a toy they can play with. And I don't know, that doesn't sit right with me anymore. I don't find it cute, I find it disturbing. Just like how the closer we get to actual robots patrolling the streets and drones watching us, and AI threatening to take over entire industries, the whole concept of Robocop becomes less cool, as I've always thought it was since I was a kid, and becomes much more horrific. Robocop is awesome as a sci-fi movie creation. He looks cool, the character of Alex Murphy is great, his action scenes are badass. It's my favorite movie of all time. But it is terrifying to imagine a world where a corporation has control over a government's police department to the degree where they can resurrect dead cops as robots. The older I get, the more I look at Robocop, unable to divorce him from his context. And that's partly due to how well the movie makes you feel for him as a person. I feel terrible for Alex Murphy. Despite Robocop being the product of an evil system, as a character I want him to triumph. And it doesn't hurt that he's so damn cool with that gun that comes out of his leg that makes people's chests explode. Robocop 3 may be a terrible movie, but it has good ideas. It is prescient in the way that the original was, not in its technology or satire of capitalism, but in the militarization of police forces, the power of corporations to use law enforcement to impose their will, and the dangerous idolization of authority figures from the local level all the way up to the presidency. It's a film that scares me more than Robocop 1 or 2, because despite it being a goofy, clumsily made PG-13 movie, the picture it paints of the world is far darker. And while Robocop 3's ending has them fighting off the bad guys and winning, we know it's only a matter of time before they come back. And in our world, the good guys seem to be at a real disadvantage. We don't have a Robocop fighting on our side. Not yet. Hi, I'm Under the Mayo, and I invite you to subscribe to this channel and check out more of my work. I have done a near 1-hour video on the brilliance of the original Robocop, and I just talked about Robocop 2. But I'm largely a gaming channel where I do a mix of strategy videos, reviews, impressions, opinion pieces, interviews, basically whatever I feel like. If you like my style, hang around for a bit. I have a lot of stuff on survival horror, indie shooters, and currently Mortal Kombat. Enjoy, and thanks for watching.